The dust cloud chased Sarah Mitchell's stagecoach like a hungry beast, swallowing everything in its path as it rumbled into Cripple Creek, Colorado. It was 1878, and the mining town was bursting with promise and peril in equal measure. Sarah clutched her worn leather satchel tightly to her chest, the weight of her secrets heavier than her few belongings as the coach finally shuddered to a halt in front of the town's only hotel. "Last stop, Cripple Creek," bellowed the driver, his voice as rough as the journey had been. Sarah stepped down carefully, her simple blue dress billowing slightly in the spring breeze. At 23, she carried herself with a determined grace that belied her circumstances. Her auburn hair was pinned neatly beneath a modest bonnet, her green eyes scanning the bustling Main Street with apprehension. 3 months ago, she had been a schoolteacher in Boston. Now she was unwed, expecting, and alone in a frontier town where she knew no one. The father of her child, a charming banker's son who had promised her the world, had abandoned her when she'd told him about the baby, leaving her reputation in tatters and her position at the school untenable. "Need help with your bags, miss." A boy no older than 12 appeared at her side, eager for a penny. "Thank you, that would be kind," she replied, handing him her single trunk. The Golden Aspen Hotel stood 3 stories tall, its freshly painted facade a stark contrast to the roughly constructed buildings surrounding it. Cripple Creek was experiencing a silver boom, and new establishments seemed to spring up overnight like weeds after rain. Inside, Sarah approached the front desk, where a portly man with a meticulously waxed mustache greeted her with practiced hospitality. "Welcome to the Golden Aspen, miss. Will you be staying long in Cripple Creek?" "I hope to make it my home," Sarah replied, straightening her shoulders. "I've arranged for a position at the new school." The man's eyebrows rose slightly. "Ah, you must be Miss Mitchell. The town's been waiting on you. School building's almost finished." "Just a few more weeks." Sarah nodded, relief washing over her. She had corresponded with the town council, securing the teaching position through letters of recommendation from her previous employer, who had been kind enough not to mention the scandal. She had enough saved to last until her first payment, but only just. "Your room is ready, miss. 2nd floor, end of the hall, most respectable spot for a lady on her own." He slid a key across the polished counter. "Town meetings tonight at the church. Folks will want to meet the new schoolmarm." Sarah thanked him and followed the boy carrying her trunk up the narrow staircase. Her room was small but clean, with a bed, washstand, and window overlooking the main street. After the boy left with his penny, she sank onto the bed and finally allowed herself a moment of vulnerability, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "We'll be all right," she whispered to her unborn child. "We'll make a new life here." That evening, Sarah dressed in her best dress, a modest navy blue garment with white lace at the collar, and made her way to the small white church at the edge of town. Inside, it seemed all of Cripple Creek had gathered. Conversations hushed as she entered, and dozens of curious eyes turned to assess the newcomer. A tall man with silver-streaked hair stepped forward. "Miss Mitchell, welcome. I'm Mayor Thornton. We're mighty pleased you've come to educate our youngsters." Sarah smiled, shaking his offered hand. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mayor. I'm eager to begin." The next hour was a blur of introductions and small talk. The townspeople were welcoming, if curious, and Sarah found herself relaxing slightly. No one here knew her past. She could start fresh. As the meeting concluded, Sarah was preparing to leave when a commotion at the door drew everyone's attention. "Doc, we need the doc," a frantic voice called out. The crowd parted as a man burst in, supporting another who was clutching his bloodied arm. The injured man's face was pale beneath the dust and grime. "Dynamite accident at the Silver Strike," someone murmured nearby. A distinguished older gentleman, presumably the doctor, rushed forward, but it was another man who caught Sarah's attention. He moved with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to emergencies, helping the injured miner to a bench and immediately applying pressure to the wound with his bandana. "Easy now, Wilson," he said, his voice low and steady. "Doc's here, you'll be just fine." In the lamplight, Sarah could see he wore the practical attire of a rancher or cowboy, worn denim pants. A simple shirt with the sleeves rolled up revealing tanned, muscular forearms, and boots caked with the red dust of the Colorado hills. His hat, a brown Stetson with a simple leather band, had been pushed back, revealing dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Miss Mitchell," Mayor Thornton said, noticing her interest, "that there is Daniel Everett, owns the Double E Ranch just outside town. One of our most respected citizens." Sarah nodded, trying not to stare as Daniel Everett efficiently assisted the doctor. There was something compelling about him, a quiet strength that seemed to calm those around him. After the injured miner was tended to and taken to the doctor's office, Sarah found herself walking back to the hotel alone. The night air was cool, the stars brilliant above the mountains that surrounded Cripple Creek. She was so lost in thought that she didn't immediately notice the footsteps behind her. "Miss Mitchell?" A deep voice called. She turned to find Daniel Everett approaching, his hat now in his hands. Up close, she could see he was perhaps 30, with a weathered face that spoke of years under the open sky and eyes the color of rich coffee. "Mr. Everett," she acknowledged with a nod. "It's not safe for a lady to walk alone after dark, even in Cripple Creek." His tone was respectful, not condescending. "May I escort you to your lodgings?" Sarah hesitated only briefly. "Thank you, that's very kind." They walked in silence for a few moments before he spoke again. "The mayor says you've come from Boston to teach our children." "Yes," she replied. "I was teaching there for 3 years. Must be quite a change coming to a place like this." Sarah glanced at him, but saw only genuine curiosity in his expression. "Change can be necessary sometimes, Mr. Everett," he nodded, seeming to understand more than she'd said. "Well, Cripple Creek's lucky to have you, not many qualified teachers willing to come to a mining town." They reached the hotel, and Sarah turned to thank him. In the soft glow of the hotel's lamps, she noticed the gentle crinkles around his eyes when he smiled. "Good night, Miss Mitchell." Welcome to Cripple Creek. As Sarah prepared for bed that night, she found herself thinking about Daniel Everett. There had been something reassuring about his presence, something solid and dependable that she hadn't felt in a long time, but she quickly dismissed such thoughts. She had come to Cripple Creek to build a new life for herself and her child, not to develop an interest in a man who would surely reject her once he learned of her condition. The next few weeks passed in a flurry of preparation. The schoolhouse was completed, a simple but sturdy building with rows of wooden desks and a small bell tower. Sarah threw herself into organizing books, creating lesson plans, and meeting the families of her future pupils. She managed to keep her secret, wearing looser dresses and finding that the busy townspeople paid little attention to her figure. But as her 4th month of pregnancy progressed, she knew she wouldn't be able to hide it much longer. Daniel Everett appeared in town regularly, sometimes for supplies, sometimes for town meetings. He always tipped his hat when he saw Sarah, sometimes stopping for brief conversations that left her both flustered and pleased. She learned that his ranch was one of the largest in the area, that he had come west after the war, and that he was respected for his fair dealings and willingness to help neighbors in need. Sarah's first day of school arrived with the crispness of early autumn. 28 children, ranging from 6 to 16 years old, filed into the schoolhouse, their faces a mixture of curiosity and reluctance. By the end of the day, Sarah was exhausted but exhilarated. These children, with their direct questions and frontier practicality, were different from her Boston pupils, but their eagerness to learn was the same. As she was locking up the schoolhouse, she heard the now familiar sound of Daniel Everett's horse approaching. "Congratulations on your first day, Miss Mitchell," he called, dismounting with fluid grace. "Word is you've already won over even the Simmons boy, and he's run off 3 teachers in the mining camp before this." Sarah laughed. "Billy just needs extra attention and clear boundaries." "All children do." Daniel's smile reached his eyes. "You understand children well." "I've always loved teaching," she replied, suddenly self-conscious under his warm gaze. "Some of us are having a small gathering at Wilson's place tonight celebrating his recovery and the start of school." "Would you join us? As the guest of honor, of course." Sarah hesitated. She was tired, and every social event was a chance for someone to notice her condition, but the sincere invitation in Daniel's eyes was hard to refuse. "I would be delighted," she found herself saying. The gathering was held at a small but comfortable home belonging to the miner who had been injured that first night. His wife, Martha, welcomed Sarah warmly, introducing her to the other women while Daniel joined the men in discussions of cattle prices and mining prospects. Throughout the evening, Sarah found her gaze drawn to Daniel. Unlike some of the other men who grew louder and more boisterous with each drink, he maintained a quiet dignity, listening more than talking but commanding attention when he did speak. At one point, she overheard a snippet of conversation about him. "Everett's a good man," an older rancher was saying. "Took in those 3 orphans after the McKinley place burned down, treats them like his own. Should find himself a wife, though," Martha Wilson commented. "Man needs a family of his own." Sarah pretended not to hear, but the information intrigued her. She hadn't known Daniel had taken in orphans. As the evening wound down, Daniel once again offered to walk Sarah back to the hotel. "I hear you've been caring for orphan children," she said as they strolled under the star-filled sky. Daniel nodded. "The McKinley kids lost their parents to a fire last spring. Couldn't see them separated and sent east to different relatives who didn't want them anyway." "That's very generous of you," he shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "They're good kids. Oldest boy, Sam, is 15, already works the ranch like a man. Emma's 12, helps with the house. Little Jake's just 7. They don't attend school," Sarah observed, recalling her pupil list. "Ranch is too far out. Sam knows his figures needs to for ranch work. I teach Emma and Jake what I can, but..." He trailed off, looking somewhat embarrassed. "Perhaps I could help," Sarah offered impulsively. "I could visit on weekends, bring books." Daniel stopped walking, turning to face her with an expression of genuine gratitude. "You do that, of course. Every child deserves an education." He studied her for a long moment, and Sarah felt her heart quicken under his gaze. "You're not like anyone I've ever met, Sarah Mitchell." It was the first time he'd used her first name, and the sound of it in his deep voice made her flush. "I should go in," she said softly. "School tomorrow." Daniel nodded, but neither moved. For a breathless moment, Sarah thought he might take her hand, but he simply tipped his hat. "Good night, Sarah." "Good night, Daniel." The following Saturday, Daniel arrived at the hotel with a wagon to take Sarah to the Double E Ranch. The drive took nearly 2 hours, during which Sarah learned more about his journey west after serving in the Union Army, his struggle to build the ranch from nothing, and his deep love for the rugged Colorado landscape. The ranch itself was impressive, a large main house built of solid logs, a barn, corral, and several outbuildings spread across a valley with mountains rising in the distance. 3 children rushed out to meet them as the wagon approached. "Is this her, Daniel, the teacher?" asked the youngest, a boy with a shock of blonde hair and a missing front tooth. "Miss Mitchell, meet Jake McKinley," Daniel said, lifting the boy onto the wagon seat beside Sarah. "The young lady is Emma, and that tall fellow is Sam." Sarah spent a delightful day at the ranch, working with each child according to their needs. Sam was quick with mathematics but needed history. Emma loved stories and showed a talent for writing. Little Jake was just beginning to read but soaked up knowledge like a sponge. As the weeks passed, these Saturday visits became the highlight of Sarah's life in Cripple Creek. The children thrived under her attention, and she found herself growing attached to them. And then there was Daniel, always respectful, increasingly attentive, his eyes following her movements with undisguised admiration. But as her waistline expanded, Sarah knew she couldn't hide her secret much longer. Already, she'd noticed curious glances from some of the townswomen. It was only a matter of time before speculation turned to scandal. One Saturday in late October, as Sarah was helping Emma with a composition while Daniel worked with the boys on a broken fence, the girl suddenly asked, "Miss Mitchell, are you going to have a baby?" Sarah froze, the pencil in her hand trembling slightly. "What makes you ask that, Emma? Your dress fits different now, and sometimes you look tired like Mrs. Wilson did before her baby came." Children were perceptive, Sarah realized. She took a deep breath. "Yes, Emma. I am going to have a baby." Emma's eyes widened. "Is that why you're not married? My friend Betsy's aunt had to leave Kansas City because she was having a baby and wasn't married." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "It's complicated, Emma. Do you love the baby's father?" I thought I did, Sarah answered honestly, but he wasn't ready for a family. Emma considered this seriously. Daniel would make a good father. He takes care of us real good, even though we're not his. Before Sarah could respond to this startling observation, they heard boots on the porch. Daniel entered, his face flushed from exertion, and Emma quickly returned to her composition as if they hadn't been discussing anything important. That evening, as they prepared to drive back to town, Sarah knew she couldn't continue the deception. Daniel deserved to know the truth, even if it meant the end of their friendship and her Saturday visits to the ranch. As the wagon rolled through the darkening landscape, she gathered her courage. Daniel, there's something I need to tell you, he glanced at her, his expression open and attentive. What is it, Sarah? The words caught in her throat. Over the past weeks, she had come to care deeply for this man with his quiet strength and kind heart. The thought of seeing disgust or disappointment in his eyes was almost unbearable. Sarah, he prompted gently. She took a deep breath and placed a hand on her stomach, which now showed a definite curve beneath her dress. I'm with child, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel's hands tightened on the reins, but his face remained calm as he processed her words. After what felt like an eternity, he looked at her, his expression not one of judgment but of tender concern. Then there will be two of you to love, he said softly. Tears sprang to Sarah's eyes at the unexpected response. You don't understand. I'm not widowed, as some in town have assumed. I've never been married. The father, her voice broke. He wanted nothing to do with us. Daniel guided the horses to stop and turned fully toward her. Sarah, look at me. She raised her eyes to his, expecting to finally see the condemnation she'd been dreading. Instead, his gaze held only warmth. I know what it's like to be judged for circumstances beyond your control. When I came west, people saw only a former soldier with nightmares and empty pockets, but we are more than our pasts. The town won't be so understanding, she whispered. When they realize I'll lose my position, no one will want their children taught by a woman of questionable morals. You're the finest teacher these children have ever had. Anyone who can't see that isn't worth your concern. He hesitated, then reached for her hand. And you won't face it alone. The touch of his calloused fingers against her sent warmth spreading through her body. What do you mean? Daniel looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. I mean that I care for you, Sarah Mitchell. I have since that first night in town. Your past doesn't change that, nor does the child you carry. Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. You can't possibly want to take on another man's child, Daniel. Why not? I've taken in 3 children who aren't mine by blood. What matters is love, not where we come from. He squeezed her hand gently. I'm not proposing marriage this instant, though I'd be honored if you'd consider it eventually. I'm simply saying that you and your child have a friend in me, no matter what happens. The relief and gratitude that flooded through Sarah was overwhelming. She hadn't realized how desperately she'd needed to hear those words to know that someone saw her worth beyond her mistake. Thank you, she whispered, unable to say more past the lump in her throat. Daniel smiled and clicked the reins, setting the wagon in motion again. Let's get you back to town before it gets too late. And Sarah, when you're ready to tell the town council about the baby, I'll be right beside you. News travels fast in small towns, and Cripple Creek was no exception. Within days of Sarah's confession to Daniel, whispers began circulating among the townspeople. A sharp-eyed seamstress had noticed Sarah's expanding waistline, and speculation quickly turned to certainty. Sarah felt the change immediately. Mothers who had been friendly now pulled their children closer when she passed. Conversations stopped abruptly when she entered shops. Even at school, she noticed some of the older children watching her with new curiosity. It came to a head on a Wednesday afternoon when Mayor Thornton and 2 council members arrived at the schoolhouse just as classes were ending. Their grave expressions told Sarah everything she needed to know. Miss Mitchell, we need to speak with you privately, the mayor said, his earlier warmth notably absent after dismissing the children. Sarah faced the 3 men with as much dignity as she could muster. How may I help you, gentlemen? It has come to our attention that you are in a delicate condition, Mayor Thornton stated, clearly uncomfortable. Is this true? Sarah raised her chin. I am expecting a child, yes. The oldest council member, a stern-faced man named Douglas, huffed indignantly. And you applied for the position of schoolteacher without disclosing this fact, without mentioning that you are an unwed mother. I did not believe my personal circumstances would affect my ability to teach, Sarah replied evenly, though her heart was pounding. This is a respectable town, Miss Mitchell, Douglas continued. We cannot have someone of questionable character influencing our children. The school board has voted. Your services will no longer be required after this week. Despite having anticipated this moment, the reality of it struck Sarah like a physical blow. She had nowhere else to go, very little savings, and a baby coming in just a few months. I understand, she managed to say, her voice surprisingly steady. May I at least finish the week to prepare the children for a transition? Mayor Thornton nodded, looking somewhat relieved at her calm acceptance. That seems reasonable. We'll have a replacement by Monday. After they left, Sarah sat at her desk for a long time, staring at the empty classroom. Everything she had worked to build here was crumbling, just as it had in Boston. Only this time she had even fewer options. She was still sitting there when the door opened again. Daniel stepped in, his expression confirming that he'd already heard the news. Sarah, he said simply, crossing the room to kneel beside her desk. I came as soon as I heard. They're letting me go, she whispered. I don't know what I'm going to do, Daniel. I can't go back east. I barely have enough saved for a stagecoach ticket, let alone starting over somewhere else. He took her hands in his. You don't have to go anywhere. Marry me, Sarah. She stared at him, certain she'd misheard. What, marry me? He repeated, his dark eyes intense with conviction. Not just because of your situation, though I won't pretend that isn't part of it. I love you, Sarah. I think I have since that first night when you walked into the church, head high despite being a stranger in a strange place. Daniel, you can't, I can and I am, he interrupted gently. I've been planning to ask you anyway. This just moved up my timeline. A small smile crossed his face. The children adore you. The ranch needs a woman's touch, and I need you, Sarah, your kindness, your strength, your smile that lights up every room you enter. Sarah's mind whirled. She had grown to care deeply for Daniel over these past months, but love, marriage. It seemed too sudden, too convenient. You'd be taking on so much, she protested weakly. I'd be gaining everything I never knew I wanted. He stroked her cheek softly. I don't expect you to answer right now, think about it. But know that my offer stands regardless of your decision about marriage. You and your child will always have a place at the Double E, even if only as our teacher and friend. That night, alone in her hotel room, Sarah paced back and forth, considering her options. She could leave Cripple Creek, try to find work in another town before her condition became too obvious. She could accept Daniel's offer of a place to stay without the marriage proposal, though that would likely cause even more scandal. Or she could marry him, this good, honorable man who claimed to love her despite her past. The question that troubled her most was whether she loved him in return. She admired him, respected him, enjoyed his company. When he took her hand, her heart raced. When he smiled at her, warmth flooded her body. Was that love, or was she simply desperate for security? The answer came to her as dawn broke over the mountains. She loved Daniel Everett. Perhaps she had since that first night when he had helped the injured miner with such quiet competence. She loved his gentleness with the children, his respect for her mind and abilities, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed. And she loved the life they could build together at the Double E. Sarah sent a note to the ranch asking Daniel to meet her that evening. She spent the day teaching as if it were any other day, though her heart ached as she looked at the children who would soon have another teacher. As the sun began to set, she walked to the small church where she'd first arrived in Cripple Creek. Daniel was waiting outside, his tall figure silhouetted against the golden light. When he saw her, his face brightened with hope. I've thought about your offer, Sarah said without preamble, and his voice was carefully neutral, but his eyes betrayed his anxiety. Sarah took a deep breath. I love you, Daniel Everett. Not because you've offered me security when I most need it, though I'm deeply grateful for that. I love your kindness, your integrity, your strength. I love the way you've opened your heart to children who needed a home. And yes, I will marry you if you're certain that's what you want. The joy that transformed his face was answer enough even before he swept her into his arms. "Nothing has ever been more certain," he murmured against her hair. He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "When?" "Soon," she replied, "before the town can gossip any more than they already have." "Tomorrow," he suggested, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I've already spoken to Reverend Phillips." Sarah laughed, surprised and touched by his confidence. "You were that sure I'd say yes." "I was that hopeful," he corrected, taking her hand and pressing it to his heart. "I've already told the children. They're beside themselves with excitement, especially Emma. She's convinced she played matchmaker." "In a way, she did," Sarah admitted, remembering the girl's perceptive questions. The following day, in a simple ceremony attended only by the McKinley children and a few of Daniel's closest friends, Sarah Mitchell became Sarah Everett. She wore her best dress, a dark green that complemented her eyes with wildflowers in her hair. Daniel, clean-shaven and dressed in new clothes, looked at her with such love that she momentarily forgot the circumstances that had brought them to this moment. Reverend Phillips, who had initially been reluctant to perform the ceremony given the situation, seemed moved by the obvious affection between them. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," he said afterward, shaking Daniel's hand. "Sometimes what begins in sorrow ends in joy." The first weeks of their marriage were a period of adjustment. Sarah moved into the master bedroom of the ranch house, which Daniel had freshly painted and furnished with a new quilt and curtains. The children helped her arrange her books and teaching materials in the small study off the main room, creating a space where she could continue to educate them, and perhaps, eventually, other ranchers' children too far from town to attend the school. Daniel was unfailingly gentle and patient, never pressing for more intimacy than Sarah was comfortable with. They shared the bed, but he held her respectfully, seeming content with kisses and conversation as their relationship deepened. One night, as they lay together watching moonlight pattern the ceiling through the curtains, Sarah found the courage to address what had been unspoken between them. "Daniel," she whispered, turning to face him in the darkness, "I want to be a true wife to you." He propped himself up on one elbow, studying her face in the dim light. "Sarah, there's no rush. I meant what I said. I'll wait until you're ready." "I am ready," she said softly, reaching up to touch his face. "I love you, Daniel, and I trust you." His kiss was tender at first, then deepening with a passion that she eagerly returned. In his arms, Sarah found not just physical pleasure but a profound emotional connection that healed wounds she hadn't realized were still raw. This was what love was meant to be: respectful, mutual, joyous. Afterward, lying in the circle of his arms, Sarah felt a flutter in her belly, the baby moving for the first time. She guided Daniel's hand to the spot. "Feel that? He's saying hello." Daniel's eyes widened in wonder as he felt the subtle movement beneath his palm. "Hello there, little one," he whispered. "I'm your pa now, and I can't wait to meet you." The simple declaration brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "You'll be a wonderful father." "We'll be wonderful parents," he corrected, kissing her forehead, "together." As Sarah's pregnancy progressed, life at the Double E settled into a comfortable routine. She taught the children each morning, rested in the afternoons, and helped Emma prepare dinner in the evenings. Daniel managed the ranch with Sam's increasingly capable assistance, and even little Jake found ways to contribute, feeding the chickens and collecting eggs. Word of their marriage had, of course, reached town quickly. Some, like Martha Wilson and Doc Peterson, sent congratulatory notes. Others maintained a disapproving silence. Sarah found she cared less than she'd expected. The ranch, with its clear air and open spaces, felt more like home than anywhere she'd ever lived. Winter arrived early that year, blanketing the Colorado hills in snow by mid-November. Daniel insulated the house thoroughly, banking the fires high to keep Sarah and the baby warm. On the coldest days, they all gathered in the main room, Sarah reading aloud from classic novels while Emma knitted baby clothes and the males played checkers or worked on leather repairs. One such evening, as snow fell softly outside, Emma looked up from her knitting. "What will we call the baby?" Sarah exchanged a glance with Daniel. They hadn't discussed names yet, something she suddenly realized was an oversight. Well, Sarah said thoughtfully, if it's a girl, perhaps Catherine after my mother. And if it's a boy, Jake asked, his face serious. Daniel cleared his throat. I was thinking maybe William after my father, William Everett. William Everett, Sarah repeated, testing the name. I like it. Will the baby have a middle name? Sam asked. Looking up from the bridle he was mending, Sarah smiled. Perhaps you children could help us choose one. This launched an enthusiastic discussion that lasted until bedtime, with suggestions ranging from the sublime to the ridiculous. By the time they tucked the children in, the list had been narrowed to 3 possibilities for each gender. They're really excited about the baby, Daniel observed as they prepared for bed. They are, Sarah agreed, brushing her hair before the small mirror. It's as if we're already a real family. Daniel came to stand behind her, meeting her eyes in the reflection. We are a real family, Sarah, maybe not formed in the traditional way, but real nonetheless. She leaned back against him, his solid presence a comfort she had come to rely on. I never thought I'd have this: a husband, children, a home where I truly belong. Neither did I, he admitted, wrapping his arms around her, his hands resting protectively over her rounded belly. After the war, I didn't think I deserved happiness. Too many good men didn't come home. He paused, his voice growing husky. But loving you, loving these children, it's healing parts of me I thought would always be broken. Sarah turned in his arms, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. We're healing each other. December brought with it a series of severe snowstorms that isolated the ranch for days at a time. Daniel worried constantly about Sarah's condition, aware that her time was approaching and fearful of complications without the doctor nearby. Maybe we should move to town until the baby comes, he suggested one evening as the wind howled outside. Sarah, now large enough that movement was becoming difficult, shook her head. I want our child born here in our home with our family around us. But if something goes wrong, Emma said, Martha Wilson is experienced with birthing. She helped deliver 3 babies at the mining camp last year. We'll send for her when it's time, Sarah reassured him, though her own anxiety sometimes kept her awake at night. Daniel wasn't entirely convinced but respected her wishes. He spent the next days ensuring they had everything needed for a birth: clean linens, hot water ready to boil, the herbal remedies Martha had recommended for pain. The baby, however, had plans of its own. 2 weeks before the expected date, in the quiet pre-dawn hours of a clear December morning, Sarah woke to the unmistakable sensation of her waters breaking. Daniel, she whispered, shaking her sleeping husband. It's time. He was instantly alert, pulling on clothes and lighting lamps. I'll send Sam for Martha right away. There's no rush, Sarah tried to assure him, though a contraction was already building. First babies often take their time, but this baby, like its mother, was determined and direct. By the time Sam had saddled a horse and ridden for the Wilson place, Sarah's contractions were coming regularly and with increasing intensity. Emma, showing a maturity beyond her 12 years, took charge of boiling water and preparing the bedroom. Jake was assigned to keep the fires stoked, while Daniel remained at Sarah's side, holding her hand through each wave of pain. You're the strongest woman I've ever known, he murmured as she gripped his hand so tightly her nails left marks. You can do this, Sarah. Martha Wilson arrived just as the sun was rising, bringing with her a confidence that immediately calmed the household. After examining Sarah, she nodded approvingly. Everything's progressing just as it should. This baby's eager to meet its family. The next hours were a blur of pain, encouragement, and determined effort. Sarah found strength she didn't know she possessed, drawing courage from Daniel's unwavering support and Martha's experienced guidance. Finally, as the winter sun reached its zenith, Sarah gave one last heroic push, and their child slid into the world with a lusty cry that filled the room. A boy, Martha announced triumphantly, and a fine, healthy one at that. Daniel's face was a study in wonder as Martha cleaned the squalling infant and placed him on Sarah's chest. Look what we made, Sarah, he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Look at our son. Sarah gazed down at the tiny red face, the shock of dark hair so like Daniel's, and felt a love so overwhelming it brought fresh tears to her eyes. William, she murmured. William James Everett. James, Daniel questioned, stroking the baby's cheek with a gentle finger. After your brother who didn't come home from the war, Sarah explained softly. You told me once he was the best man you ever knew. I want our son to have that legacy. Daniel's eyes filled with tears as he pressed his forehead to hers. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for everything. Martha allowed the children to visit briefly once mother and baby were cleaned and resting. They filed in quietly, eyes wide with awe at the tiny bundle in Sarah's arms. He's so small, Jake whispered. But he'll grow, Emma assured him, her face shining with excitement. And we'll help take care of him, won't we, Sarah? You certainly will, Sarah smiled, watching as Sam, usually so stoic, gently touched the baby's hand and broke into a grin when tiny fingers curled around his thumb. That night, with William sleeping in a cradle beside their bed and the house quiet around them, Sarah nestled against Daniel's chest. Are you happy? She asked, knowing the answer but needing to hear it. Daniel kissed her tenderly. Happier than I ever dreamed possible. You've given me a son, a family, a future full of hope. His hand stroked her hair gently. And you, my love, any regrets about marrying a rough cowboy? Sarah smiled against his shirt, only that I didn't meet you sooner. Spring came to Colorado with a burst of wildflowers and the promise of new beginnings. The Double E thrived under Daniel's management, with cattle prices high and a new contract to supply beef to the growing mining operations around Cripple Creek. William, now 4 months old, was a cheerful baby with his mother's green eyes and his father's strong constitution. He was adored by his adopted siblings, who competed for his smiles and delighted in each new achievement. One warm April afternoon, as Sarah sat on the porch nursing William while Emma practiced her reading aloud, they heard the sound of approaching horses. Daniel and Sam had ridden to town for supplies that morning, but these riders came from the opposite direction. Sarah squinted against the sun, making out 3 unfamiliar figures on horseback. Emma, take William inside, please. The girl obeyed immediately, recognizing the caution in Sarah's voice. Since William's birth, they'd had no visitors except the Wilsons and occasionally Doc Peterson. Strangers were unusual, potentially concerning. Sarah stood, straightening her dress as the riders approached. 2 men and a woman, all well-dressed despite the dust of travel. Something about the woman's bearing sent a chill of recognition through Sarah. As they reached the yard, the woman removed her hat, revealing elaborately styled dark hair streaked with gray. Her eyes, a familiar shade of green, fixed on Sarah with an expression of mingled relief and apprehension. Sarah Mitchell. The woman called, dismounting with the help of one of her companions. It's Sarah Everett now, she replied, her voice steady despite the shock. Hello, Mother. Catherine Mitchell approached the porch, her gaze taking in the ranch house, the well-tended yard, Sarah's simple but clean dress. We've been searching for you for months, she said. Your father is quite ill. He wants to make amends before it's too late. Sarah felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. She hadn't spoken to her parents since they'd disowned her upon learning of her pregnancy. Their rejection had been swift and absolute, her father calling her a disgrace to the family name, her mother weeping but offering no defense. I'm sorry to hear about Father, she said carefully, but as you can see, I have a new life now. Catherine Mitchell's eyes flickered to the house, where Emma stood in the doorway with William in her arms. Is that the child? Before Sarah could answer, the sound of more hooves announced Daniel and Sam's return. They rode in quickly, Daniel's expression alert and protective as he took in the scene. He dismounted in one fluid motion, moving to stand beside Sarah. Everything all right here? He asked quietly. Daniel, this is my mother, Catherine Mitchell, Sarah said, slipping her hand into his. Mother, this is my husband, Daniel Everett. Daniel nodded politely, though his posture remained wary. Madam, welcome to our home. Catherine seemed momentarily at a loss for words, her gaze moving between Daniel, Sarah, and the baby in Emma's arms. Finally, she said, Your father has had a change of heart, Sarah. He wants to know his grandchild. We want you to come home. Sarah felt Daniel stiffen beside her, though his face remained impassive. This is my home now, Mother, she said gently but firmly. Daniel is my husband, William is our son, and the McKinley children are part of our family too. William, Catherine repeated softly. Would you like to meet him? Sarah offered, gesturing for Emma to bring the baby forward. As Catherine looked into her grandson's face for the first time, her composed facade cracked. He has your eyes, she whispered, and your father's chin. Please come inside, Sarah invited, making a decision. You've had a long journey, we can talk over supper. That evening was tense at first, with the children unusually quiet and Daniel watchful. But as the meal progressed, the atmosphere gradually warmed. Catherine Mitchell proved more adaptable than her daughter had expected, answering Jake's direct questions about Boston with good humor and admiring Emma's handiwork on William's blanket. When the children had been tucked in and William was sleeping peacefully in his cradle, the adults gathered in the main room. Catherine's traveling companions, her brother and his son, who had escorted her on the journey, had been given beds in the bunkhouse. Your father regrets his harshness, Catherine said, accepting a cup of coffee from Daniel. When your letters to your friend Clara mentioned Colorado, we finally had something to go on, your father's illness. She paused. It's made him reconsider many things. I'm sorry he's unwell, Sarah said sincerely, but I can't simply uproot my family and return to Boston. Catherine nodded, surprising Sarah with her understanding. I can see that now. You've built something remarkable here. She glanced at Daniel. Your husband is clearly a good man. The children are thriving, and William. A small smile touched her lips. He's beautiful, Sarah. He is, Sarah agreed, feeling Daniel's hand come to rest supportively on her shoulder. Perhaps, Daniel suggested carefully, you could extend your stay for a while, Mrs. Mitchell. Get to know your grandson, and when you return to Boston, you can tell Mr. Mitchell about the family his daughter has found. Catherine's eyes widened at the unexpected offer. You would welcome me to stay, you're Sarah's mother, Daniel said simply. That makes you family. The next weeks brought a gradual thawing between Sarah and her mother. Catherine Mitchell, raised in Boston society, adapted surprisingly well to ranch life. She learned to feed chickens with Jake, helped Emma with her needlework, and spent hours rocking William while singing the same lullabies she had once sung to Sarah. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson, Catherine broke a comfortable silence. I should have stood by you, she said softly. When you told us about the baby, I let your father's anger and my own fear of scandal override what should have been most important, your well-being. Sarah turned to look at her mother, seeing for the first time the regret etched into the lines around her eyes. I forgave you a long time ago, Mother. I'm not sure I deserve forgiveness, Catherine sighed, but I'm grateful for it nonetheless. She hesitated, then added, Your father will be too when I tell him about all this, about the remarkable woman his daughter has become. Do you think he'll ever want to meet William or Daniel? Catherine smiled, a genuine warmth in her expression that Sarah remembered from her childhood before societal expectations had hardened her mother's demeanor. I believe he will, and when he's well enough to travel, perhaps we could return, both of us. You would always be welcome, Sarah assured her. This is your family too now. 2 years passed, bringing changes and growth to the Double E Ranch. With Daniel's encouragement, Sarah had started a small school for neighboring ranchers' children, teaching 3 days a week in the converted bunkhouse. The McKinley children continued to flourish. Sam now managed large portions of the ranch operations. Emma had developed a talent for training horses, and Jake showed promise as a student with a quick mind for mathematics. William, sturdy and talkative at 2.5, was the undisputed center of the household's affection. He followed Daniel everywhere, already insisting on helping with ranch chores, and showed Sarah's love for books, sitting contentedly while she read to him. Sarah's parents had indeed returned to visit the previous summer, her father a changed man after his brush with mortality. He had embraced his grandson, shaken Daniel's hand with genuine respect, and even invited them all to visit Boston, an invitation they planned to accept the following spring. Life wasn't always easy. Ranching in Colorado meant contending with harsh winters, unpredictable markets, and occasional conflicts with neighboring operations. But the foundation of love and mutual respect that Sarah and Daniel had built carried them through the difficult times. On a crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves drifted from the cottonwoods along the creek, Sarah stood at the corral watching Daniel teach William to sit on a gentle old mare. The toddler's delighted giggles filled the air as Daniel led the horse in a slow circle, one hand firmly supporting his son. "Careful," Sarah called, though she trusted Daniel implicitly with their child's safety. "He's a natural," Daniel called back proudly, "born to the saddle just like his pa." Sarah smiled, her hand drifting unconsciously to her abdomen. They had been blessed beyond measure already, but in about 7 months their family would grow again. She hadn't told Daniel yet, waiting for the perfect moment to share the news. That evening, after the children were asleep and they sat together by the fire, Sarah took Daniel's hand and placed it gently over her still flat stomach. His eyes widened in understanding, then filled with a joy that mirrored her own. "Really?" he whispered. Sarah nodded, her heart full to bursting. "Spring baby, I think." Daniel gathered her into his arms, his embrace gentle as if she were made of glass. "I love you, Sarah Everett," he murmured against her hair. "Every day with you is a gift I never thought I'd have." "And I love you," she replied, thinking of that pivotal moment years ago when she had admitted her pregnancy and he had responded not with judgment but with a promise. "Then there will be 2 of you to love." Now there would be 5 of them to love, 6, counting the baby growing beneath her heart. From the ashes of scandal and rejection had risen a family bound not just by blood, but by choice, by commitment, by the daily decision to face life's challenges together. As moonlight spilled through the window, painting silver patterns on the floor of the home they had built together, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. In Daniel's arms, in Colorado's rugged beauty. In the center of a family that had found each other against all odds, the spring came right on schedule, warming the Colorado hills and bringing new life to the land. Sarah's pregnancy progressed smoothly, though she found herself more tired than she had been with William. Daniel insisted she rest frequently, taking on extra duties and ensuring the children helped more around the house. Emma, now 14 and blossoming into a young woman, practically ran the household during the final months, cooking meals and managing Jake's endless energy with a maturity that made Sarah immensely proud. "You're going to make a wonderful mother someday," Sarah told her one afternoon as they folded laundry together. Emma blushed, pleased by the compliment. "I learned from the best," she replied, her voice carrying the slight hint of young womanhood that had replaced her childish tones. When Sarah's time came, it was different from William's birth, quicker, more intense. Daniel had insisted on having Martha Wilson stay at the ranch for the final week, a decision that proved wise when Sarah's labor began unexpectedly in the middle of a spring thunderstorm. "This one's in a hurry," Martha observed as the contractions came rapidly. "Second babies often are." Daniel remained by Sarah's side, his face a mixture of concern and awe as he supported her through each wave of pain. Outside, rain lashed against the windows and thunder rolled across the valley. But inside the bedroom, a different kind of power was at work, the ancient, miraculous process of bringing new life into the world. Just as dawn broke, bringing with it clearing skies and the sweet smell of rain-washed earth, their daughter was born, a tiny, perfect girl with a shock of auburn hair like her mother's and lungs that announced her arrival with impressive volume. "She's beautiful," Daniel whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as he held his daughter for the first time. "What shall we call her?" They had discussed names during the pregnancy but hadn't settled on a final choice. Now, looking at the determined little face, Sarah knew. "Hope," she said softly. "Hope Catherine Everett." Daniel nodded, understanding immediately, "because she represents everything we hoped for, everything we found together." Later that day, when the sun was high and the ranch had returned to its normal rhythm, the family gathered around Sarah's bed to meet its newest member. William, now nearly 3, approached cautiously, his green eyes wide with curiosity. "Baby?" he asked, pointing at the bundle in Sarah's arms. "Yes, sweetheart. This is your sister, Hope. Can you say hello?" William leaned closer, examining the infant with serious concentration before breaking into a delighted smile. "Hello, Hope, I'm your brother." Sam and Emma exchanged amused glances at his solemn introduction, while Jake bounced impatiently at the foot of the bed. "Can I hold her next, please?" the 9-year-old begged. "After you wash your hands," Daniel instructed, ruffling the boy's hair affectionately. As Sarah watched her family, this beautiful, unexpected family that had come together through circumstances, both painful and joyous, she felt a sense of completion she had never imagined possible when she'd stepped off that stagecoach in Cripple Creek years ago. Daniel caught her eye across the room, his expression filled with such love that it still took her breath away. Without words, they shared a moment of profound gratitude for the journey that had brought them here to this room, this ranch, this life they had built together. That night, with Hope sleeping peacefully in her cradle and the house quiet around them, Daniel drew Sarah into his arms, cradling her against his chest as they had done countless nights before. "I was thinking," he murmured against her hair, "that maybe in a few years we might build on that addition we've talked about. The children are growing fast, and who knows?" He chuckled softly. "Maybe Hope won't be our last." Sarah smiled in the darkness, thinking of the full, noisy, joyful household they had created. "I'd like that," she whispered, "very much." Outside their window, stars scattered across the Colorado sky like diamonds on velvet, the same stars that had witnessed their beginning: a frightened young woman with a secret, a compassionate cowboy with a generous heart, and the simple, profound words that had changed everything. "Then there will be 2 of you to love." Now there were 6 of them to love, with room in their hearts for more. And as Sarah drifted towards sleep in the arms of the man who had seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself, she knew that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together as a family, as partners, as 2 people who had found in each other exactly what they needed, exactly when they needed it most. The end.